So that with the click of that particular button, we go
That's
from
where
a
I found
non-recording
myself
state
with 2 in the pink
to a recording
and 3
state.
in my stink. Which is not how I thought that transaction was going to go. But you know, when traveling to WatCon,
You did.
Son
and
of
then
a
you stopped
bitch!
it.
All that was wasted.
No, Flamingo said I heard it.
yeah.
Flamingo, that was for
So,
you and you alone, buddy. If you want to be a patron and listen to all the shit that we say that's super awesome that we forget to record,
not so easy, is it, buddy?
you shut up.
Ah.
Shut up.
Weeks.
I think we need
weeks
to-
of catching shit for it. Vindicated.
Really? You're gonna complain about getting shit on for going ahead and messing up recordings? Morshadi still hasn't forgiven me for that one episode.
See. Mine what used to be for not clicking the record button.
Mine is just for clicking the record button, but not actually having it record well.
Okay,
I mean,
well, now that we've recorded and now that we've started recording and we've
Hey
given
guys, we're
our
professionals now.
drink
yeah.
choices of the night, Andrew, let's I'm gonna bury my head in shame while you kick this off, please.
I didn't know you could find like enough shame to like ostrich yourself, but you know what?
Bruh.
Impressive, sir. Kudos.
Andrew, the toe that this man has accumulated is very high.
At least 20 toes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Black Tower Podcast. We are a Wheel of Time podcast. Shocking, I know. We've maintained that for what, 5 into our 5th year now.
Yeah,
And we're not changing any time soon.
Accurate.
it's true.
But just to make sure you know who we are, I am your Bajan Mahale. I'm in charge of the battles, typically water guns and foam swords, because, you know, who wants to actually get hurt? My name is Andrew.
Cheers to Andrew.
Thanks.
I am your Amin Khan Mahale. I am in charge of the almonds. Wait, hang on.
Just running around with a sack of blue diamond almonds. I've got wasabi and soy sauce, and I've got lightly salted. What you want?
You know, the
Salt
sad
and
part is,
vinegar almonds are pretty damn good, though.
if I was actually in charge of that, I'd just be mad all the time because I'm allergic to almonds. So,
Oh yeah.
Oh,
so I'd just be ready. As long as I don't eat them, I'm okay. But like, so I could run around with like bags of blue diamond almonds. Like, it wouldn't be like I would have to like throw them across the room so that people could eat them. But like,
Makes
at
me
the
think
same
of like
time,
Red Skull and in the Soul Stone. I guide others to a treasure I cannot possess.
indeed. But no, I am in charge of the battle songs and the battle beats and the flag waving. I am your
Beats.
Amin Khan Mahale, Daniel.
Battle
You see,
Beats by
Daniel-
Dr. Dragon.
Amin Khan Mahale beat labs.
My
Your-
name is
your
Daniel, and
dragon
I'm here to
pin.
say.
Your dragon pin has the dragon like holding a mic.
I love it. I love it.
It's actually no. When you join the Amin Khan Gar, you actually get your sword pin replaced with a microphone. So you still have the dragon because that's the important one, but
That's
you,
the important
you lose
bit.
your sword and you get a mic.
I love it.
Honestly,
I love
that would
it.
actually
A
be
fight with
kinda
the power
That would
of
be pretty
words,
dope.
bro.
Actually, that would be really cool. Is if you were in the Bajan Gar and you still kept the sword, and then if you joined the Tsoravan Gar, you got a lightning bolt, and then if you joined
lightning
the
on the
Amin
collar
Khan
is
Gar, you had
questionable, though.
what?
Yeah.
Don't-
I
don't get lightning on the collar.
I see where you're going.
No,
See where you're
no.
Not Harry
It would
Potter
be a
orientation.
It would be
Parallel
a
to the
very,
ground
Yeah.
orientation.
Well, and I am figuring that we would also make it very distinctly different than any other historical lightning.
That I agree with.
I like
definitely
the
not put
idea
two
of
of them
it being like, yeah, I like the
Def-
idea of it being two of them, sort of, where you have like the single one that forks out.
Yes.
And it's like
Okay.
actually like real lightning, where it's like the
Okay.
As long as it's
We
not
can do
two
that.
of them side by side.
yes,
Yes. No, a
exactly.
single lightning bolt, people. And last but certainly not least, I am the Sauron Mahale. I'm in charge of all the Saurovons. So any of those Saurovons you see running around, if they act out, you let me know, and I'll take care of they little asses.
He's
'Cause
not
that's my
going
job.
to. He
And my
actually
name
rewards them
is
when he knows.
Josh.
He actually
Yeah, but-
rewards them when he knows they've been acting out.
Yeah, but only when no one's looking.
No
And
wonder your
tonight,
little
I'd like
Sauron
to-
was a pain in the ass this past weekend.
He's actually like that dad who mom comes to him and he's like, "Do you know what your child did?" And then the dad goes, "No, what did my child do?" And then they're like, "They beat a camera today by putting a tack on the teacher's chair." And you go, "What? How fast must you have been going?" That's so cool.
No. It's a, I can't believe you do. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. No. And then when the person walks off, like satisfied, you'd be like, good job. We'll go get ice cream later.
Yep.
So, and there's one other person that I need to point out tonight, and that is our sponsor, the Crystal Barista. And it's no mystery. It's no secret. We've pointed out the Crystal Barista numerous times because, as you all know, the Crystal Barista is the official sponsor of the Black Tower podcast. We raise our fists in salute to you, Crystal Barista, for this year's wrong salute. This year's Gathering Madness is single-handedly funded by the Crystal Barista, and I'm telling you right now, you don't want to miss October 14th. Put it on your calendar. Put it on your calendar. It's gonna be the most amazing Gathering Madness you've ever seen. The biggest, most amazing. A lot of smart people are talking about this year's Gathering Madness. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be
They
great.
look at me and they say, Tim,
Absolutely
just
huge.
how did you make such a
Huge.
fantastic madness? And how did you gather it all in one spot? I'm simply the best. I have the biggest hands and the greatest madness.
The other day, Michael Kramer came up to me, with tears in his eye, big, strong Michael Kramer, tears in his eyes, and he said, "How do you make such a cool Gathering Madness?" And I just said, "Michael, this is a dream. You're not real."
Gathering Madness is going to be off the ever loving chain this year. So please,
the ever loving.
You are ever loving chain. We are putting the pussy on the chain wax this year. It's happening, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be unlike any Gathering Madness you've seen hitherto before, and you're not going to want to miss it. I'm just telling you. So October 14th, put it on your calendars.
There is going to
October
be
14th.
There is going to be one thing very similar about last year and the year before and the year before that's Gathering Madness and this one is that the three of us are going to be there.
Yeah, that is the similar. That is the common denominator.
There's a through line here.
We will be at our event. Yes.
Yes, that makes sense.
Well,
Also, if you would like more details about the Gathering Madness, you cannot currently go on to blacktowerpod.com and see details right this second. We may have the date up, but I doubt that that's even true just because we are, as you can hear, very much no longer in just the straight up planning stages of it happening because many things have happened and it's going to be super cool and super fun and super dope. But as we get more details of what activities are going to be there rather than just where it is and what date it's on, we will absolutely post them to blacktowerpod.com. So definitely go and check things out. Make sure that you are up to date on all of the details of the Gathering Madness. We will have a lot more details coming out after WatCon, which, as we all know, is in a month and a half. Oh, that's already scary saying. But yeah, also go to blacktowerpod.com to check out all of the different things that we have available as far as all of our social media links and things like that. The last 5 episodes presumably are up there right now. It does get updated every so often, usually pretty well. Honestly, it does.
Yeah.
Also, you can find a little chibi at the bottom that does send you to our sponsor. She's the one with the chibi that has an Indiana Jones hat and
she's like a cooler,
pickaxe.
More awesomer Indiana Jones chibi.
That's a strong word, but okay.
It is.
But also, if you're not already in our Discord and you want the best chance at getting active updates when they're available on what's coming up,
also true.
We do put stuff most quickly, fastest, whatever the grammar is there in our Discord, more so than we tweet it out, or especially faster than we put anything on our website, because that requires work, and
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But today there will be a day when the men of the Black Tower
interface for the website yet, so makes it a little.
There will be a day when the men of the Black Tower update the website as quickly as they get information, but it is not this day.
That's true.
Also,
that's true.
By the time that this goes out publicly, all of you listening live are getting a sneak peek. And if you would like to get a sneak peek into things that we sometimes announce on episodes, you should be a patron on our Patreon, and help support the channel, because it's awesome and it's super fun. We understand if you cannot, and we're happy to work with people who cannot on alternatives and things like that. But if you can, we would love to have your support on Patreon, and you get to listen to the live shows on Tuesday nights starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, depending on what part of the year it is. But this weekend, we actually did a live stream for hitting all of the metrics that we needed for getting
Speaking specifically to people not listening live.
Yes.
I know you just said that. I'm doing the double thing.
Yep,
where
I got you. Indeed. So we have now hit the metrics for being able to monetize on YouTube. So if you are not yet subscribed on YouTube, or if you have not liked certain videos on our YouTube, if you have not smashed that bell to know when we go ahead and put new videos out and things like that, please consider doing so. It will help us out immensely, especially to do things like make the Gathering Madness that much more cool, get, even better and more fancy stickers out to those who are, Patreons, and all of that jazz. So if you would like to do direct, you can do Patreon. If you would like to do indirect, you are more than welcome to get you and all of your friends on our YouTube channel, because in the end, it will all help support us. And we are very, very grateful for the support. It is our ability to give back to you guys, because you guys are awesome and you make this whole thing worthwhile. And the whole reason we're here is so that the three of us nerds can talk about Wheel of Time to each other for your benefit. True. So there you go.
True.
Anyway, now that we're done with all of the plugs, and it's 20 minutes in, because that's just how life works at this point. Hopefully they were funny. We do like to try and make them funny so that it's not such a grind for 20 minutes of plugs. But anyway, Josh, do you want to introduce our topic tonight?
Well, I was just going to say real quick, what is channeling? What is it? I know it is the act, and we do get a very lovely.
Wait, I messed up. Andrew, you want to protect the people from spoilers, because I sense one coming in Josh's statement.
I don't. I feel that we're all adult enough to handle it, but
Oh,
More Shoddy has made it very easy to press a button
Yes.
and let More Shoddy warn everybody. So here you go, the fact checker Mahale coming in with the fact protect. Here it is.
Our conversation earlier was very apropos.
I don't know if the button actually worked.
words. Words are hard.
Welcome to the Black Tower, a Wheel of Time podcast. All right, let's check this one. This podcast episode will likely be spoiling all of the books in the series, but if Daniel is in charge of the recording, it'll never hit the editing bay. So just in case you're some masochist Patreon supporter who hasn't read the whole series and just gets off on being part of lost episodes, how about you put that spoiler condom all the way on?
You didn't realize how tired he sounds by the time we got to mine. Oh, man.
Oh, good.
All right, Josh, back to you.
Back
What
to me. Where I'm gonna
Is
fluff out my hair.
channeling?
It is time to let my hair down. Let's do this. Let's do this. Okay. I ask again. I ask, nay, I demand to know, what is channeling? Now we've actually touched on this subject many times. We've done reaction videos where we've reacted to like different articles that were written about it. We've done background breakdowns where we've talked about people's abilities to channel. We've done all kinds of things, and really it just always kind of boils down to
The fuck?
what the heck is this thing? Because you never get a very quantifiable metric in the books, right? You have women that are like, aha, they're stronger than me, but I'm stronger than them. But there's no like power level readers, there's no like power level 9,000. We don't get that. And then men don't even really have
what
that.
Vegeta's face looked like. You're right.
Men just kind of go, oh, he's really intense, more intense than me, and he's not nearly as intense as me, so I'm stronger than him. But we don't ever get that quantified. And then even taking
Honestly,
that
I think
a
that's
step
even a little
back,
much.
Yeah.
I feel like the only time that we hear how much men can channel are all like, oh,
It's so
feel
intense.
I feel good about how much I can channel, but man, that Dragon Reborn motherfucker, he can channel so much. Also,
And
I don't
then-
know why all of the Ashaman and male channelers sound like cavemen. Me
And then-
channel big,
well,
him channel
because-
more.
Because let's be honest, any man who would want to channel has already got a screw loose.
Let's not be honest. Let's be nerdy.
And let's walk that a step back. What exactly is channeling? What exactly is channeling? Now, we know that for men and women, let's start with like laying out the foundations, right? For men and for women, you have two varieties of channelers: those who can be taught to channel, and those born with the spark inside of them. Those who can be taught to channel may live their entire lives and never touch the source. Those who are born with the spark in them will at some point touch the source, whether or not they want to. It doesn't matter. You will, period, end of story. And when you take it a step further, and then of course we have men will have access to one piece of the true source, and women have access to another piece of the true source. I'm going over book mechanics, okay?
Yes, indeed.
This is how the book mechanics are.
I just had a thought.
And we learn later on in the series that even that's not exactly a constant, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Men who have access to Sidene, women have access to Sidar. There's two different kinds of channelers. When we when we hear channeling described, Moraine actually talks about it when she's teaching Egwene, and she says that people who can channel are using the true source. And Egwene at one point in time asks her, can you use it all? What happens if it runs out? And Moraine's like, oh, no. You can't use it any more than a water wheel can use up the water in the river. And that's what the true source is. It is the power that spins the wheel, and we are able to touch it. And then that's kind of it right there. Those are kind of the foundational like rules for what channeling is. And I kind of go, but there we know of example. I can think of at least one example that pretty much turns each one of those rules, quote unquote, on their heads. So the point, this whole theorizing episode is all about what is happening when we channel. If I am a channel and I take Sidene into my body and channel it out as one of the 5 powers, what's happening? Anybody want to take a first crack at it?
I mean,
Yeah,
I
mean,
I've done it in the past.
Well,
Go
and
for it,
that's what
Andrew.
I've said earlier. I've said we've hit on this in the past, but I kind of want to get like real, suck the marrow out of this subject, put it to rest, put it to bed.
I mean, I know like we've talked in the Discord about it, and I think we talked about it or started talking about it on the episode at one point. Like like the nature of channeling, like what does it mean to be able to channel, like what are you actually doing, and it kind of came down to like my camp and then everybody else's camp, because everybody told me I was crazy, which is fine, which is why I like my theory even more. Is the general consensus is that channeling is the use of one side of the true source to effectively change the environment around you, to create new things or to remove things from the environment around you to some effect, using the 5 kind of elemental-esque weaves available. My theory is that it's less about you actually creating or destroying anything, and is more along the lines of using your side of the true source to alter the other threads of the pattern around you. So it's less creative or destructive and more transformative. Think kind of like alchemical reactions, where you're transforming it from one thing to another rather than creating like something entirely new. So whenever you channel fire, or you channel fire and air to make a fireball, to me, you're not actually creating fire. You are changing the threads of the air molecules or whatever the kind of space is, from being, let's say, air into being like combusted air or fire, rather than just, oh, here's fire that burns.
Okay.
So with that, like different people's ability to channel their different strengths is a way of our limited understanding minds, talking like if you were in the world, being able to measure the capacity that somebody has to force and affect change on the threads of the pattern around them in the world.
The more pattern or the more threads they can affect is how strong they are.
Yeah. And to me, this ties in very well with Rand at the end, who has kind of seen the full truth of the world and existence. He's gone through the door of knowledge and truth, to make another Full Metal Alchemist reference. He no longer needs to, he no longer thinks about what he's doing in terms of channeling fire and air to throw a fireball. He's kind of mastered the what I think is the kind of original intent of Teleron Riyadh, and it could just will things to happen. He can will the threads of the pattern to bend and change and alter themselves around him without having to think about it in the concepts of channeling a power, dividing it into threads of fire and threads of air to make a fireball that flies through the air. Yeah, because we see a pretty heavy reliance throughout the entire series on you have to be able to visualize something in some form of way to make it happen. And just like the moving hands when channeling winds up being like a crutch that channelers rely on to a degree. I think for Rand, he was just the only person we've seen outside of Teleron Riyadh be able to get past the crutch of interpreting channeling as actually using different flows, like using fire and using air to create fire rather than, just kind of altering the threads around them, if that makes any sense. I feel like I'm like kind of like in 5 different spots.
Do you
No,
know?
you're-
Where I
That makes a lot of
really
sense.
love about that is, and you touched on it with Rand's battle with the Dark One at the very end, which we already did, spoiler warning. So, but when he steps outside of the pattern, it talks about him like digging his hands into the pattern and weaving like thousands and millions of different threads. Now, it wasn't based on the 5 rudimentary threads that people have access to inside the pattern, which are, was it fire, water, earth, air, and
Air.
spirit.
Yep.
And so Rand, whilst outside the pattern battling it out with the Dark One, is actually weaving whole ass realities. And this fits really, really well with where Andrew was going with this, is that when a channeler weaves a fireball, let's just use the example, they're not creating a fireball out of nothing. They're literally taking a thread out of the pattern and going, okay, this one little teeny piece of the pattern, I change that. When I hold my hand out, normally the pattern would say there's just air in my hand, but I'm changing the pattern to say that there's fireball in my hand and that the fireball is going to go and hit that guy in the face. And I that's kind of a whole serving of mind fuckery in and of itself.
If you take Robert Jordan's love for like physics, what makes more sense that people are able to do it? And again, I'm trying to rationalize something that is inherently irrational because it's mystical, right? But is it easier to simply alter something that already exists into something else, or to defy all laws of physics and create entirely new matter, or just completely destroy existing matter? Which is, yeah, okay, fine, Balefire. That's a really big thing about Balefire, is that there is a good chance that what makes Balefire so terrifyingly effective is that it is like a weave that has discovered a way to fully, absolutely destroy matter.
I think it's actually, I think Balefire is actually something completely different.
Okay.
There's this great D&D thing where you give your characters or your players as a DM basically a ray gun. And if they use it on something, that thing immediately disappears. But what it's actually doing is the beam is grabbing the thing and pulling it out of time and space and placing it at the final boss. So the more you use it during your campaign, the harder your final boss is, because you've just placed it in the room with the final boss. And so I think Balefire is just that. I think it's moving things, and people are just like, no, it removes them from the pattern. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It just moves them to the other side of the universe. There's another world over there that keeps sending their bad stuff here.
I very much
as well. No,
I really like the idea. That's a cool thought. I mean,
Yeah.
I disagree.
It's not
'cause-
what balefire is.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be cool if it was to like an extent where there was that, but I think balefire is meant, like
No,
some of
it
the
is.
other things are, they're it's meant to be fantastical.
Yes.
And I think having something where by just methodology of using it, you're breaking the pure laws of physics by absolutely destroying matter, and you're almost kind of using like some sort of not really superposition, but it's kind of in the same vein of superposition in quantum physics, that you could throw enough power into it to destroy it further back than now, which fits in pretty well with like the whole like quantum physics theories about like how time and space work together and how they don't work together, and the potentiality for some degree of time travel and all that kind of jazz that an Irishman by the name of Stephen Hawking was so good at talking.
Hey.
Yeah. My theory on what channeling is a little bit different, but somewhat similar, because again, the idea of Robert Jordan being incredibly scientific, and being fascinated with things like quantum physics and the science behind so much stuff does lend itself towards giving a more laws of physics following kind of magic system that the people in the world just don't really understand, that they're following the laws of physics because they haven't written down the laws of physics, because that was all lost in the breaking. And so since this was all, common knowledge back in the day, but then it was all lost when the burning of Alexandria happened, like
I mean, that's a great example on a much smaller scale. Yeah.
And so my theory is that along the same lines as Andrew is talking about, it's not actually creating something necessarily. It's not making new matter or destroying matter that already exists, unless it's balefire, because it's special. And Robert Jordan wanted to use magic to break his own rules, which is great. That's kind of the point.
It's only a weave, Daniel.
Right? That, given that the creator used the power to create creation, or it flows through creation, or it pushes creation along, turns the wheel, whatever metaphor you would like to go ahead and use, I find it to be sort of the essence of creation tucked away outside of creation, or flowing through it in an invisible way. Whichever one sort of you want to look at it as, that makes your brain hurt less. And that channelers are not actually creating fire. They are not actually creating a fireball. They are not actually creating a wall of fire that springs up from the ground. But they're building Legos. They can grab from this immense pool of Legos that is this unincorporated matter and use it to create what they would like to be having happen in this world, in the way that their brain can understand all of this unused or unaffected matter.
I just had the visual of the kid who's like, these are my Legos. I can play with them. You cannot. So like all the channelers being like, this is my bin of Legos right here. I can play with them. And then like the person who can channel more is like, yeah, well, I've got the whole Harry Potter Legos set. So that's cute that you've got the race car, but I've got the whole.
The chosen are just running around playing with Lincoln Logs.
Yes. Well, and it's sort of that idea of like, also, let me throw out there, this is a tiny little bit of a tangent, but it matters to what I'm about to talk about.
Right.
I definitely think along the lines of what Moraine is talking about. when she tells Egwene, you can never use up what's out there. You are using a thing, but it is an unfathomable expanse of just unincorporated building blocks. And you tap in and you grab the pieces that you want and you affect the world around you, but it is so much more massive than you could ever possibly use, and it is so much more massive than any single human, any group of humans, or possibly all of humanity could use. Now,
which would be the river.
Well,
in
but
the metaphor
now
that Moraine used, yeah.
Yes. It's interesting because Moraine's a dumb fuck. Like, she knows a lot. She is very smart. But when it comes right down to it, Moraine is standing there telling Egwene these truths about something she can't possibly understand, therefore has no discernible truths. If you cannot actually fathom the entity that you are using or working with or whatever, it doesn't have to follow the rules that you're saying it does.
I mean,
No,
if you think about it, they have
granted.
more evidence at the end of the series that these pools of power are more likely to be finite than they are infinite.
For example. And so again, they're trying to understand these vast concepts of stuff. And they just are doing their best. And again, that's where Moraine and the Aes Sedai and all of these other people are not actually dumb fucks. They are just trying to use the scientific method effectively to understand the world around them. And they are talking about them in the language that they have. And they are understanding them in the equations that they can put together and things like that. And that is valuable. It is very valuable. But it is kind of humorous to talk about unfathomable and ununderstandable, at least with your current tools. I'm not saying that they're literally impossible to understand, but this idea of something that you can't possibly understand with the tools that you currently have as being in these boxes that you have then made is just a little bit laughable. And it's one of the reasons that, like, again, we're not going to get into this sort of discussion, but rules for God or gods make me absolutely insane. So this thing or things that are completely outside of the realm of human understanding, this is how they work. Why? Why in the absolute world would you ever say that as a definitive thing, given that it is outside of the possible understanding of humanity at this point, and you started your sentence with that?
One of the quotes I absolutely love, and this is a quote in, I'm actually going to Google it right now so that I can actually give the person who said it credit.
Hey, there you go.
So
sorry, while he's looking that up, to finish my thought here, so one of the thoughts that I've actually always had about the about Wheel of Time is that they are on a planet, and the building blocks
are on a planet.
That the building blocks for, well, it never actually claims that, Josh. You're like saying that as though it's like a truth, like not necessarily, but I mean, it's strongly suggested given the, like, you know, moon landing and things happening in the first stage and things like that, but it's never explicitly stated. So presumably they are on a planet, and the universe outside of them is infinite, effectively. And so what they actually do is they use the building blocks for the universe's creation and actually change what's happening here on this planet, from other places. So they're basically grabbing universe building itself material and using it to will what they want in their immediate surroundings.
Correct. I will say in this, and I think this goes back to kind of where you were going with Moraine as well. This is the quote, and it's by Jill Tarter, and she's a scientist. I do not know her area of expertise. I'm sorry. But her quote is, "The story of humans is the story of ideas that shine light into dark corners." And now,
I like that.
Daniel, where you're going with this, yes, when it comes to what rules and laws govern the gods and the universal cosmic forces that basically tell us what we can and cannot do, that is based on our understanding of said foundational rules. So when it comes to channeling, you start getting in, and Star Wars has done this a little bit, right? You can clone someone, but can you clone someone with the ability to use the Force? What is that? Is that,
well, it depends on how many midichlorians
is that
they
genetic?
have.
Is that chemical? Is that spiritual? What is the element? What is the, where's the link between the ability to channel versus someone who cannot channel? What is the link? Now, let's say you've got the component that says you can channel. What's the component adjacent to that says you can channel more
Yes.
than someone else? Now we actually do, and I know I'm going to give the disclaimer in advance right now, because I know people go back and forth when it comes to this character, and this is the female Forsaken. It was Balthamel, or no, it was Agenor.
Nope. Balthamel.
Was it Balthamel? Resurrected as a
Agenor comes
woman,
back as a male. Balthamel comes back as a female.
comes back as a female, but is still able to channel Sidene.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people's, I'm not going to go into whether or not it is trans representation. I understand that's problematic stance to take. That's not the point of the conversation here. The point of the conversation here is, for all intents and purposes, this is a wholly female genetic existence of a person who has access to Sidene. So I'm going to say this: A, it's possible, because that's step one in order to understanding how this works. Now, is this, Daniel, is this like you were talking about? Is this the rules of gods? They understand way more than we do? Or is this something that they're like, when I create a body, I can go and flick this switch? Has absolutely nothing to do with the physical body itself, has everything to do with the permission I give the body, and therefore it's a spiritual setting? Where do we think the ability to channel, what echelon of existence do we think the channel ability exists in?
Well, see, Halima, beyond the obvious, is a unique case when you talk about the ability to channel, and where does it come from, and why can't a female body channel male power? In the purest terms of how life works in the Wheel of Time, Halima is a completely unnatural creation.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the Dark One has interceded in the death of a soul, intercepted that soul from moving back into the pool of souls, into the Lace of Ages or wherever, and pulled that soul out, created a new body, and in the Dark One's
borrowed.
Mind, whatever.
It's just one that he has on hand.
It doesn't matter. Same thing. It doesn't matter. And taken this body, borrowed, created, whatever, because he can definitely do both, and inserted this male soul into this female body in his mind and his rationale as a form of punishment, or at least perceived as punishment by the entity that becomes known as Halima. So this is going to be a male soul that was reborn in a forced and more immediate fashion, basically reborn into adulthood, not growing up and living life as whatever the case is. And so from Halima,
Right.
you learn and through some interviews after that the access that you have to Sidene is largely dependent on the impression or the feeling of the soul. If the soul believes itself to be male, then the soul will channel Sidene. If the soul believes itself to be female, then it will channel Sider. So it does mean that it's possible, but outside of the Dark One intercession rebirth of Halima, it is not seen anywhere else that we see in the series. Whatever, but it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So and no, and I'm glad you like expounded on that, because I believe it is Shadar Haran, when the character known as Halima takes their first breaths, is like initially very upset that they're in a female body, right? And I believe it's even given to them to
Arangar,
even
by the
saying Arangar. I believe that Shadar Haran even says that if you want, eventually the soul you can have access to Sidar, but for now, I think it's more benefit to have access to Sidene. But like, I believe that there is a specific passage, and I'm blanking right now. I need my fact checker, Mahale. Where you at, more shoddy? But I believe there's space in there where they straight up say you will have the choice. You can make the choice, and eventually you can embrace Sidar. But for now, you have access to Sidene because that's kind of where you are.
Yeah.
I do see in the chat, he who comes with the wine asking for references to channeling being in the genes, in the genetics. And this is kind of the point.
With any solid evidence.
This is why we wanted to kind of talk about what is channeling, because it's one of those rules that are accepted when you come into a book, when you come into a story. There are foundations, right? There are foundations of, and I'm sorry, and just to bring into this conversation, he does say they touch time and time again about it being bred out or being culled. That is a theory that Aes Sedai have, and that is a theory that was widely shared in Shara. It's not so much shared in, I think, really anywhere else. I think everywhere else is kind of like,
well, they don't talk about it other than like the Browns. They don't talk about it in Randland because having less, if not no, male channelers isn't a negative to the way that every culture in Randland works. But Sara, it does seem to be conjecture style evidence that would seem to indicate that there could very well be a genetic component to it, because we do see that the channelers at base level from Sara tend to average stronger than the channelers for Randland. And I think it's about somewhere in between Randland and Sara that we see happening in Shan-Chan.
Well, and just as another kind of a point on that, he who comes with the wine also mentioned earlier in the chat, and I wanted to mention it. In the Age of Legends, channeling was seen as science, as a scientific practice, as something that was very easily scientifically understood and manipulated. Fast forward 3,000 years to the next age and the post-apocalyptic fallout of the breaking, and now it's magic. We don't really understand what and why. So you've got a really great point. The topic that we're discussing right now, we are essentially, in effect, the members of the third or fourth age, not really understanding what this was, but those in the Age of Legends presumably had a much deeper understanding of how channeling worked. And I would even posit as evidence to my statement on that they were so adept with channeling, or specifically the very concept of channeling, that they were looking for a more potent version of that, ways of making channeling more potently available to channelers and other people. Now, we do know that people who could not channel did exist in the Age of Legends, because they talk about Tirangrial that were made specifically for people who could not channel. And there are theories as to whether or not that meant they had electricity.
Interesting to
Or-
think that, like, in their pursuit to bring about pure equitable balance, and I mean, I'm thinking of this more like in a Confucius way, not some
Sure.
grand statement way, just to put that out there and be very clear about that. The whole reason that we have the whole strife of the breaking and everything that we read in the Third Age is because they were trying to remove the barrier that they felt was limiting them in their scientific progress and the progress of society, being that male channelers had to channel Sidene and female channelers had to channel Sidera, and there was no bridge other than to potentially link. And even then, you were more than often stumbling in the dark, trying to control the weaves of somebody else, and just the virtues of the link aiding you in it not being catastrophic more times than not. So they were seeking out a new power that everybody could use together, so that how every channeler, male or female Aes Sedai, learn how to channel could be uniformed, and they could work better together, and could like experiment in the same ways at the same time. So there's a bit of irony, obviously, in them trying to make things where they can work better together and accidentally wound up absolutely destroying what balance they had.
Yep.
So
Well, it's also, you know, it becomes this question of was this actually the science experiment gone wrong? Because we don't ever really get a true sense of what happened at the time. And I've always thought that it was very interesting of, was this someone mad at FDA approvals? Like, was this someone who just went, no, I'm going to blow through all of the red tape that we have that's set up for us to go ahead and protect ourselves from, you know, setting off a nuclear bomb in our own midst. And I want the nuclear energy, so I'm just going to do the thing. And of course, we all know that historically, sometimes that has absolutely worked. Sometimes they have absolutely put together the nuclear reactor and it has gone really well. And people are like, ooh, you really shouldn't have blown past all that red tape, but we're really glad that you were successful and didn't kill yourself and everybody else.
Thanks for not
And
doing that, by the way.
sometimes it does not work out very well at all. And they set up the nuclear fission and they blow themselves and the surrounding 100 miles of, you know, matter and organic life to smithereens. And so I would like, it would be really cool to get a chance to hear sort of Robert Jordan talk a little bit about that, or, you know, someone who has read his notes thoroughly enough to really understand his thought process there of, was the Boar a cautionary tale of regulation? Was it a cautionary tale of greed? Was it a cautionary tale of be more satisfied with what you have? Or was it actually a situation where he was actually kind of saying, sometimes it's going to go bad, but, you know, hundreds of thousands of years later, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds or thousands of years later, you know, it'll all work out in the end and you'll be back to an age of prosperity. I don't know. It's interesting.
I believe Jeff Goldblum as Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park summed it up beautifully. when he said you were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think that you should, whether or not you should. That was a terrible Jeff Goldblum impression. I
That
don't
was
care.
horrifying.
I
But,
went for it.
uh,
The point is
there are
solid.
many better Jeff Goldblum impersonations than that, but they're not here.
Not
Right?
any on this show. Not any on this show. But I almost even wonder, one could make one could theorize that Lanfear and Luz Theron, whilst researching, finding the what is it? It's not the one power, the true
The
source.
true
Is the
power.
source? The
No, true power or true
While
source and
researching-
one power are the same. The true power is the bad one.
While researching the true power, they could have been trying to unlock the secrets of channeling and how it works. I mean,
Entirely possible.
there's just, and again, the unreliable narrator of the Wheel of Time is so prolific and so prominent that, and I honestly think that Robert Jordan, every time he uses the line, the truth that an Aes Sedai tells you is not necessarily the truth you think you heard. I feel like that's him laughing, like giggling like a shithead every time he writes it out. Like, this whole chapter, you thought you read something, but you didn't. And I'm like, dude, because there's so many times where he gives us the information and we think we know the information, but to come to find out it was from the unreliable narrator, and we were led falsely by someone else's misunderstanding of the truth of the situation.
Yep.
Which is why when it comes to what is channeling, such a seemingly simple question to answer. I remember first reading the series, my buddy, and I've shouted him out a couple of times already, because one of these days he's going to listen and he's going to hear his name and he's going to be like, what the what? So Ben Lowe, my boy Ben Lowe, whilst selling me on the series originally, when we talked about channeling, he actually said, if you are a vessel, it's filling yourself up as a vessel for the one power, and then able to water the flowers around you. And the people who can channel more are larger vessels than the people who can channel less. And I thought that was a really great explanation at the time.
So I just had a thought. Sorry, go ahead.
Hit it. I was just going to say, simply speaking, it's a pretty good overview. Like it answers the question without leaving the rest of the but what if.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, that was the end of my statement.
Do we know, and I think I know the answer, but do we know, or do we have any indications about, excluding the true power, can the Dark One grant people the ability to channel?
So in the story, it does not seem like we have any definitive evidence at all. Now, again, when he brings back the souls of the Forsaken, they seem to retain what they had, and whether that is the Dark One being able to say, here is your channeling ability back in exactly the capacity that you had it, or a similar one, or negligibly different, or whether that is their channeling ability tied to their soul, which is what he's putting back into a new body, is unclear. But it does seem like the Dark One does not have any stated ability to give anyone the ability to channel beyond the true power, which is his dominion, if that makes sense.
I mean, because it builds, or potentially builds, an interesting conundrum. Because if the Dark One cannot grant by itself the ability to channel into a body that he's putting these souls into. Then that would mean that what we've learned is some of the two things he can't do roughly would be give somebody the ability to channel and create bodies for whatever reason. I mean, that's a really weird one to not be able to do, to not be able to create bodies. Again, there's some assumption going on here that he can't do things rather than he just doesn't do things.
Sure. Because I think it's more the second one than the first, but again, they talk about it like it's a can't. Yeah.
I mean, so if for this kind of like little thought experiment, I guess I'm going to take things at face value, the things that we don't see him do and him expressly do other mechanisms to accomplish a similar thing. We'll just assume that they are things that he can't do. And it might be a bit of a trope that, as the king of destruction, how could you create life? It kind of seems like it's a bit of an antithesis to who you are as an entity. But I digress. So let's assume that he can't create bodies. And let's assume that he cannot grant the ability to channel. Just pure channel, excluding the true power.
Yep.
Then that would, at least the same way that the ability to channel and the strength in channeling apparently, or presumably, or potentially, whatever word you want to use, being bred out of people by the ostracization of male channelers, and they're being hunted down and killed. That would imply that there's at least some, maybe not just like flamingos that I said here, that there is a genetic component to channeling. Because if it was, but then it raises the question then, if these Forsaken that are reborn and their souls are snatched near the moment of death and are put into these bodies that the Dark One has on standby, or that the Shadow has on standby, whatever, do the bodies, is the reincarnation of sorts of the Forsaken such a big deal because the bodies that he's putting them back into already have the genetic ability to channel, and they may or may not have the soul component? Because it seems that the soul is going to be what maintains memory, what maintains experience and skill and everything. Much in the same way we see Rand, especially once he finally accepts who he is, have just this incredible breadth of ability that Lews Therin was renowned for having. Are these bodies that already have the genetic component that he's putting the Forsaken souls into, and those are in much more limited supply, so that's why it's a bigger deal for the Dark One to resurrect his servants.
So I really like that idea of 100% of the population. If you look at 100% of the population, 50% of them have the genetic predisposition to be able to channel, but only 6% of the souls that are actually tied to those bodies actually have the mental capacity, spiritual understanding, whatever you want to call it, as far as that is concerned, to actually use that physical predisposition. Bodies are also genetically predisposed in some ways to an amount of channeling. And so when you get a soul that is matched with a body, that is when you get a channeler. And that's actually one I like that a bit, or I actually, even more so, what if that's what's going on with the difference between the spark and the ability to learn?
The spark, you already have both, and the ability to learn, you have the genetic, but the spiritual or the soul-based trait has to still be created.
Yes. And of course, like, it's also a thought of like, again, it's sort of is your soul able to learn? So there's even sort of a third category here of some souls, some spirits will absolutely undergo the moment of realizing what they can do. But only ones that are matched with genetically predisposed bodies are actually able to do that, and therefore they will touch it. Because at the moment that the spirit realizes it can do it, the body kicks in.
So
The ones who
If
can
it's able.
learn, if it's a well, yeah,
Oh.
the ones who are the spirit is going to understand what creation is, or not what creation, what the power is, will become scientists because they have the predisposition spiritually to understand what creation is and the flows of whatever, but they're matched with a body that is not genetically predisposed to be able to channel. And therefore, while they will never actually touch it physically with their genetically predisposed body, they just, have this mental thing that they'll be able to understand what that is. Then there's
So-
also the third category of souls that can be taught to understand that connection, and their body already does it. So when they actually get that moment of clarity that someone goes ahead and explains to them what it is that they're supposed to be doing, their body can do it and their soul can understand it. And then there are just
that.
other souls that don't ever understand it, or bodies that never can touch it. I also
Guys, I
love
think-
that
I
Leia
think we
just threw out
cracked
a
the code.
thing, is that's why some of the heroes of the Horn never touch the source, because their soul, their brain, their idea of self is unable to make the connection of where it is that the power, the force of creation can actually be manipulated. And therefore Birgitta will never come back as a channeler, because while she's dope as fuck and no one should ever say otherwise, her soul just doesn't have that moment of whatever needs to be done. And so she can be put into a body that is genetically predisposed, but but her soul is never going to make the other piece of the recipe to make a channeler.
So we in effect, according to kind of where the conversation is going, and I really like where the conversation is going.
Same. This is fun.
good. You
Genetic.
might like my
So
next idea.
oh boy. So I'm going to say we've got three components genetically. Can the body physically handle or understand channeling? If yes, continue on. Can the soul residing in that body also understand and accommodate for channeling? Because we do
I
know.
actually really like that word, because I've been running into this now a few times when we've been talking about it, and I used it. Understand feels like the wrong word. It makes it feel like there's a lack or a thing there. But the what word did you just use again? Not
Accommodate.
understand. Accommodate. I like that word so much better. It feels like a not a reward, but like an extra thing. So it's not that you can't understand. It's that whatever it is can't accommodate the other piece of it, or the other pieces. I really like that. Sorry. I wanted to jump in there because this language has been throwing me a little bit
I'm on
as
the
we've
other
been
side.
talking about it. And
So
it's hard.
I like the concept of it being like an understanding and ability to conceptualize, because if we see people that have the genetic ability to channel but not the soul based ability,
Mhm.
and if the
Sure.
soul houses memory and the essence of the
which we
person,
know it does.
I could imagine if
no
somebody
is a
was
strong word, but we presume very strongly.
imagine if somebody's reborn and they're born into a body that doesn't have the genetic traits to channel, but their soul remembers the conceptualization and how channeling could work, or they at least are predisposed to understand it. when they hear Aes Sedai talking about it. I think you could have that. So I like it. But accommodate does sound nice. I'll give you that.
And Sexy Morshadi, the fact checker Mahale, coming in clutch. Basically, just, you know what? I don't even want to say it because it kind of just. It
I
wastes
wish
the
that I had
entire
gone
damn
ahead
episode.
and I know, right?
Our entire damn episode summed up in a single statement from Brandon Sanderson. I'm going to read it right now, though. The ability to channel, I think this has all been reported, but he stated, he being Robert Jordan, definitively that the ability to channel is tied to the soul. He stated definitively that the spark was not tied to the soul, but could be affected by a specific body. Just because you had the spark in one life, you could be reborn and just have the ability to learn. He stated that with 85% probability that strength in the power was not tied to the soul, meaning that if you were an uber channeler in one body, you could be weak in the power in your next body.
Which absolutely means that, again, Andrew hit the nail right on the head.
I was about to say, you know what that means is Andrew's one smart motherfucker. I raise my tankard of taint to Andrew and his immense, supreme smartness.
No,
Yes.
don't do all that. Like, don't
Oh, I'm
inflate
doing
the
it.
ego.
Yes,
It's happening.
Halima's body was specifically found for Balthamo. Moradin's body was specifically found for Shamael. That is absolutely, that's canon. That clearly, based on that interview, if Brandon is being honest, which it seems like he just about always is, then that seems to be 100% the case.
So
That the Dark One actually had to find bodies to house Ishamael, Balthamel, Agenor, Lanfear, all of these different people that were
that would make
as
sense.
close to their power
readily
level
fed.
as possible.
Yes.
But so
and that would
here's where my other thought was coming in.
Yes.
Because if we know that the creator is responsible for all creation, that means that whether it's just introducing the variety of the different genetic predispositions of the body, to introducing the different capabilities and understanding abilities or accommodation abilities of the soul, that at the moment of creation, assuming coming into the first age and like our current time world, our timeline, whatever, anybody that could potentially use magic was already known. And then moving into the second age, where there is no concept of this ultimate evil, the concept of the Dark One doesn't earnestly exist.
Sure.
Everybody that could or ever would have the ability to use the one power in the Age of Legends belonged exclusively to the creator. Exclusively. Meaning that the only way that the Dark, doesn't mean that they're good people, but belonged exclusively to the creator.
Right.
Meaning that the only way for the Dark One to ever have underlings that could use the power had to be the innate corruption of the creator's channelers. That there could never be somebody born of the Dark One's influence and accord initially predisposed to fight for his side or to be on his side to be able to channel, because he could not bestow that ability.
So interestingly, and yes, that part is also true, because I would even take it one step further, is actually going even more into that. On some level, you've actually hit on a larger fact in some ways, that if the Dark One is actually incapable of creating bodies, period, other than maybe Shadar Haran.
You got a perfect one, so put it on me.
And if he was,
if
it was incapable of touching the world in the same way, and we actually have, this is actually going really well into another episode that we have set up, which is does the Dark One actually have dominion over death? Where when the Dark One is actually removed from being able to touch the pattern, does that entity actually still have the ability to reborn souls? Or does that become an ability that it has after the bore? In that case, every single Dark Friend and every single Forsaken and every single Shadow, whatever you want to call them, all were pure ones, because they all were sort of created as threads in the creator's pattern, and the Dark One has just been corrupting them and corrupting them and corrupting them and getting more and more souls on their side, because they never actually had followers that were inherently Dark One followers. They were all creator made entities that chose to go to the dark,
which is what makes the Heroes of the Horn so incredibly remarkable, because even at the moment of death, they are so closely tied to the pattern of the creator that they can't be intercepted by the Dark One.
This is so off in another direction that I love so much,
Leia,
but also
Leia made me think of something else. So she asked in the live chat, again, another reason to become a patron, just $1 a month, and you can do this too.
You jump into our show, you ask us questions and challenge our Wheel of Time worldviews.
I love
so Leia
it.
asked the question, for the male Forsaken that get put in male channeling bodies, did the Dark One have to cleanse the body of the taint?
Yes.
And immediately I went back to the statement I made earlier of, if memory and mentality and everything is tied to the soul, does the taint even truly touch the body, or does the taint lie on the soul? So by extension, would there then be absolutely no need for the Dark One to cleanse a body of anything other than maybe sickness, because the soul is where the taint resides?
Oh my God.
Which
Guys.
is what makes getting so much of the taint so horrible, because it's on your soul.
No, I'm going to say taint resides solely in the body. And here is my reasoning as for why. I present to you 2 bits of evidence. One, Nynaeve is able to remove the taint from a man's brain, and they are then free to channel Saidin post cleansing without any further issue. Rand, in having access to his previous memories, the taint was not removed from the brain, but rather a weave was added around the physical taint upon the brain, which allowed him to function relatively normally whilst having access to those memories.
Does it though? You're saying
Yes.
that like it's fact.
Well, okay. According to him, he has access to the memories. And when he confronts Cadsuane and is like, that's a lovely paralysis net you're wearing. I wore one of the first ones. And she was like, a what? And then he like accurately identifies the different Tirangrial in her paralysis net. Like, I'm all for being like, okay, he's totally batshit and he made a word up. And since nobody can verify what he's saying, it's cool. But when he accurately identified the role of the different Tirangrial, like, come on, that's if he doesn't have access to specific memories of Luther and Telamon, he does have access to knowledge that allows him to like correctly identify a number of things he should not be able to identify.
Well,
So
so let me
the-
throw out a question here. That's not we're gonna wrap up here soon because this is not a question I actually need answered now. But this goes back to sort of the unreliable narrator and the understanding concepts that are ununderstandable. Josh, what is the soul?
It is
Can
a
humans actually affect the
membrane.
soul? Is Nynaeve actually seeing 100% the madness in the body and only the body? Or is she actually able to see the madness in the soul? And that is part of the thing. Like, you don't have to have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that. But it's definitely one of those things of you're sort of saying this as no, definitively it's in the body because Nynaeve can see it. Why? Why is that definitive? And so again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just
No, that's
saying
a good point.
what
It's a good point.
what pieces of this are there. It is suggestive because it seems like the body is what can be healed. It is. But at the same time, how do you give definitive answers to undefinable questions and such? So Andrew,
that was
go ahead, you were gonna
half.
say.
That was literally half of the question I was going to ask.
Okay, cool.
And I was going to say, like, well, I want to ask this question, but to ask that question and maybe get an answer, I have to ask another question.
Okay.
Again, going back to Balefire. We know
Ooh.
that an
I love
entity
going back to
Balefire cannot be resurrected by the Dark One. Now,
Presumably,
is
yeah.
that the case because Balefire touches and directly affects the soul?
Ooh.
Or because the Dark One can only intercede if it's near the moment of death, and Balefire pushes back the moment of death beyond when the Dark One can reach. That would also then mean that the statement that the Dark One cannot resurrect someone Balefired is not actually true, because if the Balefire was only strong enough to do a couple of seconds, then the Dark One could still intercede and resurrect the soul.
I don't think that the Dark One has a problem resurrecting people burned out by Balefire.
Oh,
I think we had this
Okay.
discussion previously, and that was anyway.
Yeah.
But
We will definitely talk
being-
more about that at some point.
No, well, I asked the question because
Yeah.
if Balefire is effective at preventing resurrection because it touches the soul, then even though it is by itself a all physics and rationale breaking weave, it still proves that channeling can touch the soul. And so it could be the interpretation of the madness that Nynaeve is seeing and that others are seeing whenever they learn how to heal madness, rather than it only being something intrinsic to the body.
That is a valid point, because she's not physically opening up the brain and seeing black tar like substance covering the brain. So that is a valid point. I like it. Hey, guess what, guys? I'm gonna dive into this one last thing that the fact checker Mihail has said, and then we're gonna use that to flavor our final thoughts. Let's see. The question is, can you sever a person from the true power or with the one power? And the creator himself says, not in the same way. If you try and gentle a man or still a woman who's capable of using the true power, you'd have to use another method. Question then becomes, so is it not only the Dark One who can stop giving the Forsaken the true power, but can they be cut off as Asmodean was cut off? Robert Jordan said, read and find out. Bravo! I'm not going to tell you. They could be cut off, but the problem with that is nobody knows how to do it. It is possible that some of the Forsaken themselves know how to do it, but nobody else does. The question then becomes, what happens when Rand and Asmodean have this conflict and Rand severs his ties with the Dark One?
And Rand severs some black ties.
The black ties. I believe this is going back to Eye of the World.
This is the Eye of the World.
Yeah,
it's when Rand cuts the ties from Asmodean back into the ether. And Asmodean is like, or not Asmodean, Agenor.
Balthamel.
So all of this brings again,
No,
like
it's
this,
Agenor. Balthamel dies immediately from the Green Man. Agenor is the one that Rand cuts.
And then he fights
Yeah.
Balsamon and does the
So-
same thing. He cuts the cord.
all
from
this raises
Balsamon.
another
Oh, you're right. Sorry. So yes, Ishamael. You're right.
another interesting question. How does stilling and gentling work?
Right? Does it cut off the
What's-
soul's ability to understand it, or does it cut off the body's ability to touch? It's
New episode.
I-
write that down.
I-
write that
I
down.
think it-
Write that down.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, that is a good thing for us to explore more. But I think it has to all. It has to be the soul, because
it?
the individuals that get stilled and gentled, they can still sense the source, and I
Mm.
don't think you'd be able to sense it if you didn't have the genetic
Well-
markers. And I think it's also a lot harder to alter someone's genetic makeup unless they can like
Well,
bombard the shit out of somebody with like gamma radiation. But then how do you heal bombardment with gamma radiation?
Well, but when I
Oh,
actually
God.
hear them still being able to sense it but not being able to touch it, I feel like that actually sounds a lot more like
Oh.
an understanding of what they were doing without
so it's
actually
a
being able to do
physical
it anymore.
severance.
Like,
So
does
do you
that
think-
that to me sounds like it's a physical alteration, but the brain retain or the soul retains the ability
The
that
soul
it
remembers.
taught to the brain, if you will. Oh my gosh.
So wait, would that mean that if somebody has the soul marker to be able to channel, but not the genetic marker, if they can understand it, could they potentially experience the feeling of stilling without ever having been actually able to channel?
That was actually kind of what I was talking about earlier, of like somebody who
Oh.
understands what's happening becomes like a great scientist because, you know, they understand something outside of their ability to do, because channelers sort of stop thinking about it.
Bite him
because
up.
they-
Well, no, he can channel,
Right?
but
Oh,
no,
okay.
like your desire for discovery isn't actually like I want to learn. It's you don't know that you can't channel, and your body craves the ability to channel, and that's what
Yeah.
makes you an Albert Einstein.
Oh my God.
Hmm.
Einstein. Oh,
anyway. All right.
Anyway.
So
holy crap.
my final
Okay.
thoughts on this is that we need to have
Oh
a
my
lot more
God.
final thoughts on this,
I
because
need- I
this
need
is
a
such a
Drink.
wonderful.
That's my final thoughts.
Yeah, this is such a wonderful. Just Robert Jordan is a genius. I mean, we all knew that already, but just like again, the idea of putting together a magic system that is so ethereal and yet also so real, and then going ahead and giving us just enough information in interviews to back ourselves into corners and find out new information and do everything like that. It's awesome.
Damn.
My final thoughts on the subject itself, on the question itself of what is channeling.
Oh.
I am now personally very much on the side of, well, I guess that's a different question. I don't think that we've actually changed my mind in any way about what I think sort of the act of channeling is, of sort of grabbing onto the building blocks of creation and using them to change the way that the world is around you. I'm so glad that we got into so many other things and asked more questions than just what is channeling, especially because all of us had relatively straightforward, to a certain extent, answers that were understandable as far as what we thought channeling entailed. And I think all of them work. One of the nice things is all of us can defend our thesis on what we think channeling is. But it opened up the floodgates to all of these other questions that are great. And so my final thoughts are, I love these fucking discussions and I love the questions that they bring about. And I'm excited to go ahead and throw a number of other metaphysics and whatnot into our topics list and see if we can blow ourselves and our listeners' minds as much as possible again later. So if you are not a Patreon, do it. You can come and blow our minds and ask questions that really make us think and just
Come and
make
see
our
if we can
episodes
blow
that
ourselves
much
and our
better.
listeners.
You can come and blow.
You guys are 6th graders. Get out.
I mean, I wish I was. I didn't have bills in 6th grade. Fuck this shit.
But very fun. I appreciate both of you for going on that journey with me. I also appreciate all of our live listeners who went on that journey with us. So there you go. Those are my final thoughts. Always a good time.
Do you want to finish off, Josh? Or do you want to go
you know
next?
what? Here's what I'm thinking of. I've gone back to junior high math when it comes to the Venn diagram. I don't know. Is it math? I don't know. One of those junior high classes, clearly very effective and very awesome with me because I understand exactly where I learned it. But it's a Venn diagram. One circle is the physical, one circle is the spiritual, and one circle is the mental, or the mental. And as we've established, I feel like the physical is a switch. Either your body can or your body can't. And the soul is a variable resistor. Now, for those of you who don't know what a variable resistor is, your volume on your stereo is a variable resistor. Less resistance equals more volume. More resistance, turning the volume down. So the soul has the variable resistor. Either you can turn it up to 5, or you can turn it up to 10, or you can turn it up to 100.
Sounds like a
That's-
80s or
that's-
90s rock band.
How much
Bringing you the latest
you're
track
able
from
to
Variable
channel.
Resistor.
And the mental, which we didn't really get a lot of chance to discuss, but is canonical in the series, and that is the mental determines which side of the one power you have access to, Sidene or Sidar. And God, this conversation went so much deeper than I expected it to, and I'm so happy it did. And for my final thoughts, I feel like this is just so awesome. It's one of the things I absolutely just love about this book series, and the reason I keep coming back for more. So yeah,
You're on your
That's it.
47th reread, right?
yeah. Well, I did take a slight break because someone bribed me to begin reading The Wheel of Time if I started reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. And so
Okay.
I only in the name of spreading the good word of our Lord and Savior, the Dragon Reborn, have I
Put on
taken a break
hold
for my
the
reread.
reread. Yes,
But
indeed.
I'm burning through ACOTAR
As the
quickly.
creator
I
intended.
I finished up the first book today. It's less than when it comes to Wheel of Time, but that's okay. Andrew, what are your final thoughts? That's not to say I'm not enjoying ACOTAR, by the way. It is actually kind of fun. But yeah,
Cool.
continue.
Good to know.
I've maintained this headcanon since I randomly thought of it one night, and not to say that I'm the first or only one. That the channeling is best thought of as your ability to transmute the world around you, not again like creation or destruction of anything. In the words of Flamingos that die in the live chat, we didn't start the fire. We just
Oh, damn
changed
it.
the air into fire. Yeah. I think it ties in really well with Teleron Riyadh. I still think that Teleron Riyadh basically serves as a training ground for humanity. Those that can access it can use it to start unraveling the mysteries of how to affect the world around them. And I think that answers Rand's pipe that in the end, he simply, as he would in Teleron Riyadh, but in the waking world, wills it to be lit, and therefore it is lit. Because he now has complete and total mental mastery over the world, because he's been in a very, 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 very unique position to see the truth of the world and how the world works together. You know, you see this in sci-fi all the time. This ascended consciousness can make things happen sheerly with force of will and effortlessly normally. I think it's like half of what we see happen in like Star Trek. That being said, I think like the fact that we came to the conclusion that there was a soul-based and a genetic-based marker or prerequisite for being able to channel without having to have the questions that Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson answered, and that our fact checker Mahal Morshadi brought up, I think is great. It does show that we can come to accurate conclusions without the fact checker Mahal if we must, though we don't always choose to.
I don't wanna.
But I think it's really cool, and I think some of the best discussions like this that go more into like the metaphysics of the world bring up more questions, because it makes it easier to think of topics for future episodes, so it's less brain power and more content. I mean, it's a never
Don't say
ending
the
incredible
quiet part out
discussion.
loud.
Yeah, all right. I think it's great. So yeah, this is definitely one of the discussions I'm left with more questions than answers.
Oh yeah.
And none of them are about what I think channeling in and of itself is. It's
Right.
all about the ancillary aspects around channeling. So
Love
and the
it.
wise words of a man known as Borat. Great success.
Great success.
Indeed.
So thank you all for being here. I am so happy. This was such a great conversation. I'm seriously looking forward to seeing your comments below, telling us what we missed, telling us the things that we maybe got wrong. Point it out, but bring your receipts. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for behaving so well whilst receiving this week's weekly dose of taint. And we hope that wherever you are, you leave here just a bit more insane than you were when you first started. From all of us here at
And if
the
you
Black
do,
Tower,
Let us
I
know, is
have
the insanity
been-
on your soul or your body?
Yeah, that's it. Tell us, soul or body below.
You
tell
feel it
us
in your
right
brain,
now.
or do you feel it in your taint hole? Which one?
Wait,
From all of
which-
us here at the Black Tower,
You have a
I am Josh.
solar body?
I'm Joshua Soroban Mahale.
Yes.
That's it. We're done. We're done.
Yeah.
Soroban Mahale.
This is actually all paint. I'm actually green and covered in like, what is it called? Chlor, whatever. I want to say chloroform, and that's definitely
That's
not what it is.
incorrect.
That's
Chlorophyll.
not.
That's it. Chlorophyll. Yeah, I'm covered in chlorophyll. Yeah. Anyway, I've been your Bajan Mahale, Andrew.
And I have been your Amin Khan Mahale, Daniel.
All the
And from
holes.
all of us here at the Black Tower, thank you very, very much for being here, for listening to this episode. We look forward to having these crazy discussions in the lobby at WatCon with all of you lovely people who are going to be there. Also, this is both for live and non-live listeners. More rooms in the room block for WatCon just opened, so go onto the WatCon website and go to the hotels and travel and things like that. Get yourself a room in the room block. They are a reduced rate. I think they are not quite as reduced as they were originally, but again, that's what happens when you have to get more rooms, which awesome problem to have. So go for it. Go and get your rooms. We will see you there. And from all of us here at the Black Tower podcast, we hope that you're having a wonderful morning. And in case we don't see you again, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
And remember, it's chlorophyll, not chloroform. That might keep you out of jail. Might keep you out of jail if you go with chlorophyll.
Or is
Always
it?
running the show.
In the tower, you can bring your pain. In the tower, you can feel the strain.
You've been having so much trouble just fitting